and welcome to Ready STEM Go, where we talk about some of the big STEM questions floating around with our QUT researchers, students and alumni. My name is Nicola and I'm a final year Science and Communications student here at QUT. I've got the privilege of chatting with our experts and guiding you through a series of thought-provoking questions this series. We're here today at our QUT Garters Point campus. QUT would like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara as the First Nations owners of the land on which QUT now stands, and pay our respect to their elders, laws, customs and creation spirits. We recognise that these places have always been places of teaching, research and learning. I'm here today with Callan Alexander. Callan is a Threatened Species Project Officer at Birdlife Australia and a PhD candidate and research assistant at QUT. Callan has worked with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology to write species descriptions for the Merlin identification app, which millions of birdwatchers use online. He recently completed a Master of Philosophy using sound recordings to monitor the powerful owl. After 7 years of volunteering, Callan received a Distinguished Service Award from BirdLife Southern Queensland in 2023. Outside of his studies, Callan also has a background in music and is still heavily involved in the Australian music industry. It seems like sound plays into your research, work and personal interests, with ecoacoustics, birdwatching, or should I say listening, and music. Callan and I have actually met before during a mid-year research vacation scheme, where I worked with Callan to listen out for the Australian musk owl. But today, we'll be talking about how AI and technology can help save species using ecoacoustics. Welcome, Callan. It's lovely to have you.
Thank you for having me.
We have so much to get into, but I wanted to start with your passion for birds. So where does that come from?
I was very lucky to have a family that always spent a lot of time in nature. Our holidays were always very nature orientated. My dad liked taking photos of birds. I only really started bird watching in like a traditional sense in my first few years of uni. I found an app called eBird, which a lot of the bird watchers use, and it helps you track all your lists. And that just triggered something in my brain. You could like track the species that you're seeing and see patterns, and I just thought that was so cool. And so, grew up with a family that loved nature, and I think it just sort of translated to really loving birds.
Yeah, I mean, that's a natural progression, pun intended. So from birds to music, how did this combination of your two passions lead you to your research?
I've always been a really oral person, or oral, just sound just clicks in my brain a lot more than visual. So like my sight isn't particularly good. So always liked sound. And when I go out bird watching, I use my ears a lot more than my eyes. And I think having spent a lot of time doing music growing up, it just sort of made perfect sense to work in a world where you can use sound and combine that with birds at the same time. Match made in heaven.
Yeah, that's awesome. What is your current PhD research about?
So my PhD project is looking at bird assemblages on the granite belt with a specific focus on vineyards. So the granite belt region of southeast Queensland, which is about 3 hours west of here around Stanthorpe, has really, really unique and interesting bird communities, and often we're finding that there's actually really rare and unusual birds turning up on the vineyards themselves and almost using the vineyards as habitat. So my project is funded by Wine Australia, and we're looking at how birds sort of interact with vineyards and what factors influence their presence, basically.
Using sound, is that bioacoustics and ecoacoustics? I've kind of heard of these terms before, but what's the difference between them?
That's a really good question. So bioacoustics and ecoacoustics are often used interchangeably, but there is a difference. So bioacoustics is when you're only referring to the sound of a living organism. So it's animal sounds basically. Whereas ecoacoustics, you're looking at all sounds in the environment. So you're looking at man-made as well as natural. So they're very similar, but bio is just living things and ecoacoustics is the whole environment. So they're very, very closely related.
Yeah. Is there differences in the uses for, say, ecoacoustics versus bioacoustics?
So bioacoustics, I might be wrong, but I believe bioacoustics is pretty much, it's part of ecoacoustics. So bioacoustics sort of sits within ecoacoustics as a whole. But usually when you're working on a project, there'll often be elements of both contained.
What are the advantages of, and why do we use bio and ecoacoustics?
So particularly from a bird context. Bird surveying is quite time intensive. It requires, you need people out in the field to do it. And if you wanted to survey a whole bunch of sites at the same time, you need a lot of people. It's just not really feasible to get 150 people with similar bird watching skills out in the field at the same time. So where the sound recorders come in is I can put one of these out in the field, and it will record at the same time every day for months. And if I put 100 of them out, 100 of them are recorded at the same time every day for months. So you're essentially getting a bird survey every day at hundreds of sites with just one person. But the problem with that is you get an unlistenable amount of data. So where my work sits is in the space of trying to find rapid ways of analyzing that acoustic data and still getting meaningful results.
Why is machine learning helpful then when we're using ecoacoustics?
So basically, machines are much better at listening than humans. Not necessarily more accurate than a human, but they're much more patient than humans are. So we can get a machine to listen to, when I say machine, I mean that in a very loose sense. But we can get a machine to listen to thousands, even millions of hours of data, where you just can't get a human to do that. It's not possible. And it can also listen much faster than a human can listen. So they're not listening at real time like a human listens. They can go through very rapidly, because what we do is we turn the sound into an image and we train models to identify patterns of an image of a particular species that we're interested in. So basically, the machine learning just makes it much more efficient, and we can go through so much more data so much quicker.
Your colleague Susan Fuller said that ecoacoustics in particular can provide insight into overall ecosystem health. So how do ecoacoustics actually show that?
Totally. So sounds can tell us a lot about what's going on in a particular environment. There are a lot of species that are what we call indicator species. That means they can tell us something about what's going on there. So there are certain species, like the powerful owl, where if you've got a powerful owl in that environment, it tells you something about that environment. In the case of the powerful owl, it means that you've got usually old growth trees. It means you've got a lot of possums, and it usually means you have some sort of riparian vegetation going through that habitat. But things like cane toads make noise, invasive birds make noise, noisy miners make noise. So all these species that make noise, ecoacoustics, we can find out things about the environment that would take us a really long time to find out through manual surveys.
In your masters, you were developing these deep pace learning call recognizers. I'd love to know more about how actually you built them, and what are they and how do they work?
So at the moment, the first step for building a recognizer, and for those who don't know, a recognizer is just what we call those models that automatically detect a certain species in the sound. At the moment, the first step for that process is for someone like me to manually go through the data and draw boxes around the calls that we're interested in. So for powerful owl, for example, I put out a bunch of recorders in areas that I knew there were powerful owls nearby, and then I go and we call it annotating, which is essentially drawing boxes around the data. And then what we do is we train a model, we feed all of those calls into that model, and we essentially teach the machine to recognize that species.
In your time with Cornell Lab, you wrote a lot of species descriptions for the Merlin identification app. So for those who don't know what the app is, what is the app and how can we use it?
So Merlin is a free app built by the Cornell Lab, and at the moment, it can be used to identify photographs of a bird that you see, and it also is a free bird guide. So you don't have to pay to get a bird book or a bird app. It has pretty much all of the Australian species there. You can see photos of them, you can hear what their calls sound like. But what they're also working on is an automatic sound ID. So it's like a Shazam for birds. So if you hear a bird calling, you can push record and it will tell you what bird is calling. It's not working very well in Australia yet, but I was at a conference last week and they are working on it. So soon enough, you'll be able to push sound ID on your phone and it will tell you what bird is calling with pretty high degree of accuracy.
That's pretty awesome.
Very awesome.
Yeah. What's an inspiring moment then from your journey at QUT that made you realize how ecoacoustics has the potential to save threatened species?
I I think the biggest thing for me is the work that we've done on eastern bristlebird, which is a extremely rare bird in Queensland. We hadn't seen it. The last record was sort of in on public land. It was in sort of 2010, around there. So it's an extremely rare bird in Queensland, and we built models to automatically detect the species. There's less than 50 of this bird in this northern population remaining. And we had one known population in Queensland on private land that we knew of. And after those 2019 bushfires and droughts, we had no records for a few years. So we're very worried that they're extinct in Queensland. We built these models, and using the acoustic recorders, we've managed to relocate those birds again. So there's a very, particularly in the threatened species space, acoustics can give you a survey effort that you just cannot achieve with on-ground surveys, because you can monitor those crucial sites every single day, which is almost impossible to do with a human, especially in those remote areas.
That's really incredible that you guys were able to make that impact through ecoacoustics. And again, with more than 200 Australian birds at risk of extinction according to the 2020 Action Plan for Australian Birds, what advice do you have for someone that wants to help save threatened species?
I guess it depends sort of what your skills are and what you like doing, but probably my best recommendation for most people would be to get involved in citizen science. There are lots of citizen science programs that you can do without even having to sign up to a formalized volunteering program. So things like get on eBird, get on iNaturalist, record the birds that you're seeing, take photos of things for iNaturalist. That's probably the first step that I recommend for someone that's just not engaged at all. But then you can start volunteering for local organizations, use your skills in a way that will help benefit conservation outcomes. Everyone has something that they're good at and that they can do. So you might not be a person who can go and do bird surveys, but you can probably help in another way.
What can they start doing right now to help them? Is citizen science something that they can do?
You can download iNaturalist on your phone right now and go and take a photo, go to your local bushland, find a plant that you don't know what it is, take a photo of it, and someone will identify it for you, and it will go into a database of plants in that area. So if you have absolutely zero background knowledge, iNat is a perfect place to start, I reckon.
As someone who's experienced both undergraduate and postgraduate studies at QUT, what challenges have you faced, and what's your top tip for someone looking to go on a similar journey?
I think for me, my biggest challenge was just not knowing what I wanted to do, or even knowing that some of these pathways existed when I was in high school. I didn't even know what ecoacoustics was, or that it was even something you could do. And it was only coming to uni that you even realize that that sort of thing exists. So my recommendation for people would probably be jump into something that you're interested in and get a better understanding of the entire field. For someone who specifically wants to work in this space, I think you do a science undergrad and see what you like and push in that direction, basically.
Yeah.
Find something that you love doing is what I would suggest.
Who do you currently work with in your PhD?
In my PhD specifically, I'm funded by Wine Australia. My supervisors are Professor Susan Fuller, Professor Paul Rowe, and Dr. Aisha Tullock. So I have a mixture of Paul is in the computer science world, Susan's the ecology world, Aisha does a lot of agriculture work, also ecology and birds. So I have a really great team of supervisors. And then that project is also supported by Birdlife Southern Queensland. So those are the main people I'm working with in the context of my PhD.
What does your future look like? What's next on the cards for you in your career?
I do not know.
PhD, foreseeable future?
Yeah, it's when you finish a science PhD, it seems like you have a lot of options in terms of which direction you want to go. You can go private, you can go consulting, you can go research, you can go academia. I do not know. I would love to go into academia and do a postdoc, but it does sort of just depend what's available when you finish. So I'm just going to finish and see what happens. So, yeah.
Lastly, where do you see this kind of AI and ecoacoustics research expanding to?
It is moving so quickly. The difference between now and even 2 to 3 years ago is unbelievable in terms of how good the models are and how people who aren't computer scientists now have much better access to using these models. And it's moving so fast. So QUT has just partnered with Google on a project where they basically built a search engine for sound. It's called the Acoustic Observatory Search Tool. You can look that up. I believe it's live now. So there's all sorts of awesome things happening in the space, and I think it's just going to keep moving really, really quickly.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Callan. I've honestly learned so much, and I'm sure we'll continue to have these conversations.
Thank you for having me.
And for everyone tuning in, tune in to the next episode of Ready, Stem, Go.